Hello and welcome to Ministry Mondays with Meg. I'm Meg. I am Reverend Meg Biddle. I currently serve as the National Coordinator of Ministry Life at the American Baptist Home Mission Societies and the host of Ministry Mondays with Meg, which is just that thing that brings me joy to be able to talk to folks serving in ministry in so many different ways and just to see how they live their life and the stories that they have to share with everyone. So today, I guess you're my new friend now. My new friend, Reverend Dr. Cliff Matthews, ta-da, pastor of St. Luke's Missionary Baptist Church, is here as my guest. And for people, like me who for some reason didn't know who you were, um, I'm sure I've met you. I feel like Baptists aren't that big. We had to have bumped into each other somewhere, I'm sure. But whatever. So for people who don't know you, why don't you tell them a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, all that fun stuff.
Well, first of all, Meg, thank you for allowing me to come on this platform. I have watched your podcast before. I enjoy it. You are phenomenal, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Cliff Matthews, and I am currently the pastor of the St. Luke Missionary Baptist Church, Charlotte, North Carolina. I have been there going on 24 years. So we celebrated 23 in May, and I've been there, since 2000. So I've enjoyed my stay there. Beyond that, I am a native of West Palm Beach, Florida, born and raised. After high school, I went to the United States Air Force, where I traveled the world and had a great experience. Came out of the military, felt a call to ministry, went to college and then to graduate seminary. Went to Louisville, Kentucky, where I got my my seminary degree, Master's of Divinity. Fast forward 2017, I went back to school to get a master's in social work. And I went back to school after finishing that in 2019 to get the doctorate of ministry degree from Duke Divinity School. And I'm a licensed clinical social worker, associate, or a therapist here in North Carolina. Pastor at church, I'm a therapist, and that's who I am. I am married. Me and my spouse, we have a total of 3 small children that we are currently rearing, ages 10, 9, and 8. I'm sorry, ages 10, 8, and 7. And just that's who I am.
One, obviously you love education. um, that's that's a lot of degrees. That's a lot. That's phenomenal. Wow. And two, 3 kids that little. Yeah, C minor
Yeah,
24, 20, and 13. Wow. Wow. But that's
yeah,
must be
yeah,
it
yeah.
is it fun though? I forget what they're like when they're all that young.
Well,
13 is
yeah. So full disclosure, yeah, I have this is my second set. Earlier, I have older
Mhm.
children who are 34 and 27, and yeah,
Mm,
and this set of smaller children, you become wiser as you get older, and um, you're able to, in some ways, right some wrongs or be more
mm,
present in some ways. It's
yeah,
fun. It's taxing
yeah.
sometimes, but it keeps me going. It keeps me young. It keeps me kind of, I learn new terms every day from them that, their friends talk about, and I'm able to pick up on it. So I don't feel so out of touch.
Right? I mean, when you go from mom to bruh, that was something. I mean, I'm like, "Are you talking to me?" "Yeah, bruh." Okay. Now I'm bruh, whatever. But yeah, you're right. You feel like you at least get a little bit of it, because they do. There is something new, a new term every day, and boy, do they have them, don't they?
Mhm.
So you've been in Charlotte for 20, almost going on 24 years as the pastor. And
Yes.
wow, wow. Um, so is is your church, is it a large church? Is it a predominantly black church? Are you multicultural? I mean,
Mhm,
multiracial?
mhm.
What kind of, what does St. Luke's look like?
I would say St. Luke is a church that is predominantly African American, and I think our worship pattern, our worship culture is reminiscent of traditional African American worship. Um, I would say that the church itself is 73 years young. So I'm
Okay.
only the third pastor, and I followed someone who had been pastor for over 40 some years, right? And so it has a pattern or history of um, having long pastorates, and I don't tend to buck that trend at all, right? It
Right.
is a church made up of all God's children, right? And
Mm,
so we pride ourselves on being a church for everybody, a church where we really emphasize the importance of living the ethic of Jesus, and really making sure that it is a place that is indeed open, welcoming, embracing, which is in the best traditions of the Black church, of course.
so I mean, you start with all God's children, and I don't feel like you can
Mhm,
go wrong after that. I mean, that's the way it should be, all God's children, and I hate that
mhm,
we have to define what that means, but
mhm,
it it is what it is what it is.
mhm.
So your church is a member of AWAB, of the Welcoming and Affirming Baptist, and from what I understand, there are only 3 black churches that are AWAB members, right? I mean, is
Mhm.
ha has it always been, has it always been welcoming? Was that a process? I mean, talk to me
No,
about, like,
no, yeah,
how, what's the
yeah,
history of this church
yeah. It
here?
is
I
a
mean,
well, it is a process that is linked to um, growth and development and understanding the importance of making it a place for all God's children, right?
mm,
I would say that I would say at its best, St. Luke has always been a place. We did this um, process that discovering your why with Simon Sinek and all of that. We had a
yeah,
group that did that back right before the pandemic. It was in January of 2020, and you just heard about COVID on the West Coast, and like, that's nothing, right? And a few weeks later, it's like, oh,
mm,
this is major, right? But we did this exercise, and one of the things that really was the people who were there. It was a robust day long exercise. That St. Luke has always been a place that has been a place for folk to come. It has not been defined by either income status um, or class status, just a place, right? In its history,
mm,
it wasn't birthed out of a split, which is so typical of Baptist churches. It was just a group
right.
of folk decided we wanted to have a church in the Druid Hills neighborhood, and let's just open up. And it was first a tent, and then it was established under the past pastor as a force within uh, the Charlotte community. And I would say one of the things that defined um, my tenure there, and it's not been easy, has been moving the ball forward when it comes to being a place of embrace. So, since I have been there, we saw our first rotation of female leadership, right? Female deacons, female trustees. Um, and then we also have the first set of women who were licensed, and eventually a daughter of the church was ordained through American Baptist. So my tenure has been that. Um, and that has allowed us to go ahead and true in the African American tradition, there is an expectation or there is this sense that pastor is, and this is wrote about by several scholars. J.D. Otis Roberts is one who talks about the prophethood of Black believers. There is a sense that in the Black church, the pastor does function more in a prophetic vein than perhaps our counterparts. So that means oftentimes the pastor is saying, I see something and we're going, as opposed to what do y'all think and can y'all come with me, right? And so that's part of what occurred when it comes to this issue of being welcoming and affirming. But again, that has not been an easy process.
Well, I can't imagine it's easier. I mean, that it's easy for anyone. I've served as pastor at two different churches, and it's, you know, it's either, yeah, it's a great idea, but, you know,
Mhm,
or
mhm,
it's the, no, we're just not even gonna talk about that. Kind of, yeah. So I love the prophetic voice though, to go, this is really where I believe, not so much of, yeah, what do you think? You want to get on board kind of thing. That's
mhm,
it's a beautiful, it's a beautiful image, of the pastor as really
mhm,
as prophet. Um wow. And just to have a group of people that believe in you and in your ministry so much that they're like, yeah, we hear you. Let's listen. Let's lean in. Let's engage. Let's do this hard work because it is. That's incredibly hard and
mhm.
important work that needs to be done in the churches. Um, did you lose members of the church? I mean, it's usually to be expected.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, right? And that is
Mm,
part of it. And I need to be clear and to be as transparent as possible.
sure.
And this is also linked to my own sense of self discovery, coming to
Oh,
better understand who I am, how I am, um, and taking the risk to be vulnerable at a
mm,
place where you have served as pastor for so many years, right? One of the things that I would say that um, people appreciate, people always, I think, appreciate authenticity. They
mhm,
appreciate a willingness to be real, to be true to who you are. And I would say that at the end of the day, that that goes a long way, right? And so part of this process cannot be extrapolated from self-discovery and from a willingness, in the words of Paul Tillich, the courage to be, right? Being able
yeah,
to affirm oneself in a context that is perhaps threatening, but being willing to live that out, to walk that out, to be present, to embrace that, 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 that goes a long way as far as helping folk understand both not only who you are, but the seriousness about what you stand for, right? So
yeah,
all of that is part of that process. And the miracle is that as I came to self-awareness, came to self-discovery, came to understand who I am, and being able to affirm that first in self, right? Being able to know there is a place where at its core I am able to affirm self and to function from self. And in so doing, I think the rest is history. Yeah.
yeah,
Do we lose folk? Absolutely. Loss a ton of folk, and I would say, yes, lost a ton of folk, um, and we'll discuss a lot of that down the road. Why that happens, because it is related to only 3 churches in AWAB that are African American. It's all connected.
But what you're saying about it, that whole coming to this, I mean, yeah, because I mean, I was raised in the cornfield in the middle of Indiana, that's a red state, and in and here you were talking about being, raising up your first generation of women deacons and treasurers and all that stuff, and I'm going, yeah, that's the American Baptist Church that I was raised in Indiana. You didn't have women, you had deaconess, so that meant you cleaned
Mhm,
up, the husbands' wives, they cleaned up the communion.
mhm.
You didn't have women on the trustees. Um, Women's Sunday, the fifth Sunday at night, it wasn't. And so, here's me celebrating, going, yes, he's got women that are doing these things. And then as you change, as you grow, as you become the person that you are now, to go, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about this, I've been seeing this, I'm I'm going about this all wrong. And to come and go,
Mm,
oh, that's, I mean, yeah, it's a huge, it's
mhm.
it's also it's also a beautiful thing when you can break down those walls and go, okay, God, I was so wrong. Here I am, me into, yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. It's intentionality, right? It's like living with intentionality. I choose you on purpose every day. I choose
Yeah,
you, but that's everybody, you know.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but also,
yeah.
right, like that it's not okay if you can disagree, like you can fundamentally disagree, with things LGBT,
Mhm,
but you
mhm.
cannot use that as an excuse to treat that person as a less than, even if you disagree. If
Yeah,
I don't even know if
I,
I'm
I
wording
would
this right,
say,
but
well, no, I would say to even take it a step further. So one of the things about helping churches become welcoming and affirming
mhm,
has to do with what writer calls this whole, to see congregations as communities of discernment, right?
mhm,
That
okay,
that that is this sense that we come together and we begin to discern the fruit of the spirit. We begin to
mhm,
validate each other in the context, right? And there's so much biblical warrant for this. If you go to Acts chapters 10 through 15, with the call or with the conversion of Cornelius,
mhm,
and the calling of the council in Jerusalem, what really happened is proximity to the other that was defined
mhm,
as the other. That proximity led to a spiritual awakening that said we can no longer do that. So at St. Luke, yeah, so we are Baptist church. So there is no, uh, uh, I can't say everybody supports LGBTQIA rights, right?
right,
But I can say that that permission giving not to is part of our Baptist identity. What I will say, however, is they have been given an opportunity to understand there is no fear in this. There
mhm,
is no fear in inclusion. There is no fear in embrace. There is no fear in saying this, because I hope they have seen, um, the fruits of the spirit in the work of the ministry that God has called me to, and that's all I can rest upon.
amen, amen, amen. Oh, yeah, yeah. In the African American tradition, is is being in the LGBTQIA community, is that looked upon even different than it is in, let's say, the white community? Is it even less acceptable?
Well, I would say um, perhaps yes. I would say yes. Yeah, I would say yes,
Okay.
and I would say, and there are reasons. There are reasons for that, right? And it has to do with what I wrote about in the article, and it is my belief that the Black church doesn't have a problem primarily with queer identified persons as much as it does with all things sexual, right?
Okay.
That the Black church uh, is a church birth and that developed in some of the most horrific periods of American history, right? And that birth and development cannot be understood apart from the reality of systemic traumatization that occurred to Black bodies, right? And that was manifested a lot of times in sexual exploitation, both of
Mm,
women and men on plantations, or whether it also meant the absence of agency, an inability to affirm oneself and one's own sense of destiny. Um, and that kind of experience where it was the, and that experience of this, how can I say it? uh, yeah, the racialization of Black sexuality that
mm,
manifested a lot of times in stigmas um, associated with Black fertility, uh, Black sexual prowess, images of Black women as Jezebels, images of Black men as a threat to society because of their sexual appetite, um, and othering of Black sexuality as being animalistic.
mm,
Church of the Black community, right? And Cornell West talks about this in his book Race Matters. Uh, that basically sexuality in the Black community is a taboo subject. We just don't talk about it. We just don't
mm.
deal with it because that is the area where we have experienced the greatest vulnerability, exploitation, shame, and that can explain some of the vitriol that you hear that is homo negative that comes from Black voices, right? It has to do with the fact that Black body sexuality has been a target, has been exploited, and it lingers somehow in our collective DNA. And
Mm.
so to have a conversation about sexuality um, is really the starting point. It's kind of like, how can I say it? We uh, the queer issue or inclusion is something that even as churches begin to deal with it, is something that is only going to be effective if that is married with an overall conversation of Black body sexuality, right?
Mm.
Because that is the area where we have experienced a lot of trauma.
There is so much to learn. I mean, there is so much to learn. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna know this unless I have conversations with Cliff, or I read this in books and articles and things, like, because how else am I going to learn? Because we do what we do to history in this country. We make it
Mm,
say what we want it to say, what's comfortable. I mean,
mhm.
it's the same way traditionally, some places is preached. They either do the hell and damnation, We do the, rainbows and unicorns and all this stuff that makes us feel happy. We don't do the things that makes us that we must talk about. I mean, wow, that's I've yeah, just the things like that God does in our lives and the people that God puts in our lives to teach us so many things. Earlier this morning, I talked to Curtis D. Young, who wrote The Risk of Being Woke. I mean, yeah, um,
Mhm.
and learn so much from him. And I don't know, how long was this process? Because I can just imagine like sitting in a congregation going, I'm gonna need like a week or so to digest this at least, um, before I even talk about it.
Mhm.
I mean,
Okay. Mhm.
right? I mean, it's a
So
process, right?
yeah, yeah, it's a
Very
process. So
long?
I would say, yeah, well, I would say as I became more aware of who I am, how I ticked, who I was, right? As I
Yeah.
began to settle that within myself and begin to hear from um, my own God that I am okay, right? That I have been called, I have been accepted, I have been gifted a chance to be in ministry. Began a conversation as early as 2005, 2006. So 2006, I started my first doctoral attempt in earnest was at the Episcopal Divinity School, and there I was really focused on Black church and sexuality, right? And
Mhm.
so I came back, having been exposed to that environment, and really began to talk. I remember doing a Bible study on Black church and sexuality, and actually began to have conversation that had to do with how we see ourselves as Black body. What is Black body sexuality,
Mm,
right? How do we embody the erotic? How do we understand that?
mm,
What is the connection between our anti body framing that we have internalized and the lingering issues around healthcare disparity and the social determinants of health, right? How have we adapted this Neoplatonic notion that is prevalent in some of Paul's writings, where
mm,
we basically devalue the body but value the spirit, right? How has that given us permission to be out of body and think that out of body is God's will, right? How do we um, come to the table and have a conversation about sexuality, about the erotic, right? I remember preaching a series of sermons out of the Song of Songs, right, and really bringing home this passionate desire and how it was God ordained. It wasn't about the church and Christ as much as it was. It's okay to affirm that there is this energy that exists that is something that is God given, and for too long, we have allowed um, persons to tell us that that is wrong and evil, right? Now, I'm not saying
yeah,
that all societies don't have some sense of taboo they put around sexual behavior for reasons of societal good or societal um, sustainability, right? But at the same time, I think there is a real sense that in the Christian tradition, we have folk like Paul, like Augustine, like Aquinas, who have given us this lingering sense that all things sexual is somehow bad, right?
yeah,
And how do we help folk come back to body, to affirm feeling and eros and all of that as not vile, right? So I started
right,
doing that, and in part of that, you do talk about queer identity, if love is love, let's talk about love, right? And so let's
right.
process through that. So we started working through that, and yeah, and so again, some folk took it, some folk did not, right? Somebody gave me a plaque, and it said basically that this is a zone of transparency. Enter at your own risk, and that's how it's been. That um, I think, yeah, yeah, it's been a place where conversation things have at where other churches won't touch it. So there we go. That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking about the whole conversation about the sexuality and the church. Yeah, because you're right.
Mhm.
It basically it it becomes sin. It's Adam and Eve. It's yeah, and you don't ever get beyond it. You don't ever get beyond it.
Mm-mm.
You don't
Mm-mm.
ever have that invitation to talk about. Oh my gosh. Yeah, to be transparent
Mm-mm.
about it, and love is love. Wow.
Yeah. Our conversation is don't do it until you're married. Don't.
Yes.
We have a lot
The
of
purity
frame
culture, yeah.
walls we put around it, right? And then,
Yeah.
in Black church, we have this tendency, we don't talk about sexuality, and we have all these prohibitions, which sadly are always targeted towards women, you know, um, which only goes to reinforce that sexist trope of Black women as sexual tempters. They're
Mm,
Jezebels, right? Which is a message, sadly, too sad, very sadly, the Black church internalized from broader white, culture that did see Black sexuality and the problems associated with it as falling at the feet of Black women, right? Because
mm,
Black women were Jezebels who were never satisfied, that caused Black men to become the aggressive, uh, bestial persons that they are. Now, I'm saying all that is crap, right? But I'm saying you can't study American history and not see as early as the 1700s that kind of stereotyping of Black bodies being done. Sadly, it's been internalized. And so we have all these things about what Black women can't do, can't wear a dress unless it's here, and got to always make sure that you have everything tapped down because you have so much that you can do to really mess up, good men, right? I'm saying that we just need to have conversations around all of this as we talk about queer identity because it does relate, right? And I make a statement in my doctoral project that if and until we deal with Black sexuality as taboo, uh, the reality that we face is if we don't have folk that have come to a healthy sense of Black embodied sexuality from a heterosexual perspective, then when you start talking about queer identity, you're already at a deficit, right? It's like
mm,
if if you can't get folk to affirm the beauty of the erotic between bodies, that is a gift, that is wonderful. If you can't get folk to get there, if they're still stuck on how sexuality is something you don't do a lot, you don't talk about it, you don't. If you're still stuck there, when you start talking about queer identity, well, it's already problematic because that's not something that we are equipped to talk about. So that's part of what hinders the number of Black churches that are part of AWAB. Not only has AWAB heretofore been um, not present at those functions, but that's changed. Um, it's the reality that even now that AWAB is present, there's going to be the recognition that entering these waters of of dialogue with AWAB cannot be extrapolated from dialogue about sexuality. And that's where, it becomes complicated for the Black church.
Wow. I think I'd like to read your dissertation. I'm sure I would. I think I would learn a lot. I mean, that's what this life, I think, is about. Is that need to be the one that the lifelong learner that that goes, okay, I had no idea, and now that I know, I'm going to I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to think about this thing
Mhm.
differently. I'm going to view this differently. I mean, Ju start with Jesus. Let's not make Jesus a white man, you know? I mean, come on. Let's let's not be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanna be for the people, all the people,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
not make a qualifying statement, the whole stupid love the love the sinner, hate the sin. No, just love the people. I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
what we're
Yeah.
supposed to be. But it's so helpful to know, I mean, that starting that is a way bigger question. That is a way bigger than just, you know, whether two men together is okay or not. That you have to start with what we've done, what we've done, period. I mean, with what we've done,
Mhm.
and then parse that out with wow, yeah, um, what we've done.
And if we want to have an honest conversation, part of what needs to happen is some deconstruction that needs to happen. And I just want to say this, that I think it is so amazing that we have so objectified Jesus, that Jesus absolutely has no passion. We talk about
Right?
the passion of Christ with suffering, but we don't talk about this man named Jesus who walked, who felt, who had energy, who had desire, right? And part of our willingness to engage, especially in Black church, but the broader church, and I'm thinking about now the works of folk like James Nelson that
Mm,
talked about, that first raised this issue of the sexuality or Jesus and sexuality. I would say even for Black church, just to understand that this sense that Jesus is our elder brother is linked to his um, absolute humanity, right? And that it took 3 centuries after his, really about 2 or 3 centuries after his death, before we get this framing of this dualistic Chalcedonian nature of fully God and fully man. It took a
mhm,
long time for that to come around, right? But early on, this was a passionate brother who engaged with people, who felt intensely. And somehow we have to get that back into the conversation, and we're going to have a wholesome, um, Jesus-centered theological conversation about the gift of human sexuality and all its expressions.
I would love I would love to be a fly on one of those walls in that conversation. I mean, I've had that conversation with colleagues, some of them, because, some of them, aren't safe to have that kind of, but to be able to talk about the passion of the Christ and then be all the passion. I mean, he lived. He didn't just die. And yeah, on the third day, he lived. And if you believe all those things that we say, that he lived and he laughed and he loved and he da 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 da, then yeah, I want to have that conversation. I want to I want to have that conversation. How do we
Yeah.
start having better conversations? How do we do this?
Well, I think this is a good way to start. I think also, and this is where I've been wrestling with myself, and maybe it comes from my background or my training as a therapist or a clinician, right? Meet people where they are, and maybe
Mm,
it's a reaffirmation of my Baptist identity, right? Um, I have a statement, and I'll say it, and I want to put it out there and just be clear about it. Uh, if anybody is a student of Baptist history, when you start thinking about those persons who in Europe began to say no to established religion and began to buck and began to say this isn't right, right? When you begin to look at core Baptist uh, uh, principles or characteristics, and when you look at Roger Williams coming
mm,
and the founding of the colony of Rhode Island, his banishment from Massachusetts, right? I want to say, and this is probably controversial. I want to say, Baptist identity, Baptist ideology is queer to its roots. It is absolutely outside. It is queer identity at its roots. You can't talk about somebody saying to first Americans, you are included, you are my brother, you are welcome. That's Roger Williams, right? Uh, and this willingness to stand and to be isolated, to be talked about, right? Um, that so when I'm saying we just had our biannual, it was great. It was
yeah,
great, and the
yeah, it
and the
was.
and the theme for such a time as this. I want to say, I think for such a time as this, as America is so polarized, I do think if we can get more of the if we can have more understanding of Baptist identity and Baptist um, history, right? It allows for this invitation to the table, right? We concluded the biannual with table conversations, and I wasn't there. I understand they were great, right? But having people at the table, sitting at the table, who may have wholesome, robust disagreements about stuff. That's the nature of Baptist identity, right? But at the end of the day, can we just talk, right? And so I think that's where we have to get to, right? When we start having absolute declarations about you're going to hell, or someone says you're not Christian because you don't believe that, I think that's a non-starter and it's not Baptist. I think good Baptists understand, you know what? Can we? I'm just going to talk to be plain now. You know what? I don't like nothing you just said, but you my sister. Let's keep walking together.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we have to do. That helps us get there. Uh, and how we do that as American Baptists, how we do that as churches, how do we allow folks to disagree, but to say, but I still want to support that missionary going to South Africa. Now, I don't like this other stuff, but can I tell you what? You need to raise so much every month to support them. I'm on that, right? That's Baptist identity. That's Baptist stuff. We are the place where we are a big tent with diverse ideals, but we have a single mission in mind, and that is making disciples. And that's how I think. I've talked too much, Megan. You need to shut
No,
me up
no
because
way, no way.
I go
I'm ready.
forever.
I'm ready to make you general secretary.
Oh,
Like,
please. I support the one we got. I think he's awesome. And I support the leadership of American Baptists. I think they're doing a fantastic job of
they are.
navigating the via media, the middle road, right? To really understand that we're holding forth and we're coming together, and that requires a lot of Baptist ideology really being able to function at its best, right? You're not evil. You're not evil. We just may choose to disagree.
Yeah. And if we could honestly get there to the to that place, like I yeah, we don't agree on everything. We may not agree on anything other than, you know, Jesus. And that's okay, but it's not okay to use it as an excuse to treat someone as less. As you said,
Mhm.
but you're still my sister, but you're still my brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um if we could get there, oh, if we could get there. What we could do if we could get there. I mean, talk about changing the world. That's it. That's it. I don't
Well,
agree.
can we just say this? And
Yeah.
part of this cognitive behavioral process that I'm accustomed to, let's do some reframing and let's just say, here we
Yeah.
are coming off a great biannual
Mhm.
with wonderful topics to discuss from our
Yeah.
table conversations. Maybe what we're realizing is we are doing the thing. This is
Mhm.
exactly what we're doing. We are moving. We are being that big tent, right? And that's what I'm hoping we can do more of when it comes to working to get more Black Baptist churches to understand and come on board with AWAB. You know, it's about engagement. It's not about saying you're wrong because you don't. It's about saying, listen, let's just have a conversation, and
Right.
and and that's what I think the current AWAB leadership is doing. I think the
Mhm.
recent hiring made of a director of of a development director who is phenomenal. I think is great. I think that team really understands the importance of engaging with the black church. Um, as I said in the articles, based upon the commitment made in this strategic plan, right? It's spelled
Yeah.
out that this is where we're going to go. And in as much as a board member, I can help with that. I'm all on board to help, to recognize that it's going to be, um, you know, not without a struggle. That's a book you probably know about it. Vashti
Mhm.
McKenzie, first female AME bishop. Her book, I have found, I can't say, and I'm speaking from me, I can't say that she would endorse this. I don't know her at all, but her book becomes a paradigm, I think, for the whole issue of inclusion, right?
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
it recognizes that there is forward momentum, but it doesn't come without a struggle. Right? That's
Mm.
part of the process. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, do not. I'm sorry that I didn't have more. I feel like I'm lacking intelligent questions. Sometimes I learn so much. I I don't always have things to add to the conversation. It's just being at the table and listening and leaning in and learning and going, and now I know. And now I now I can make a change within myself, or I can see this a different way, or approach this a different way because of what I've learned. Um, I'm I'm grateful. I really am grateful. Um, so I guess, you know, one listener, viewer, I will put the links to Cliff's articles. here in the show notes so that you can find them. They're with the Christian Citizen. Um, and please give them a read. But to you and all you do, one, thank you. Um, I I I really do appreciate your voice. And I hope to learn so much more from you. And you can just introduce me to all the people, and I will sit here and just marvel at the people that God has created to bring us together. But so you think about all these things that you do in your life, the joy. What what brings you joy?
The present moment brings me joy.
Mm.
Um, and maybe it's this focus on mindfulness, being present in the moment. There's so much good happening that sometimes we do have to kind of, uh, pull back some of the negativity we hear so much of. But I just believe there's so much happening good at this present time, right? That gives me joy, right? It's not. It feels like we are making tremendous strides towards being the community of Jesus, right? That gives me joy. Right now,
Mm.
that don't mean it's not it's easy. It don't mean
No.
there's not some stuff, and and you have social media, your folks saying this and talking about this and all of that. Yeah, all of that's there. But I just think I do believe this. There's a phrase. Um, there's a phrase. Oh my goodness, you're getting me all caught up now. In the psalm, and it says, "For God alone, my soul in silence waits." And this whole issue of
Mm.
this silent waiting, anticipation, right? I think sometimes we get so caught up on all the voices we're hearing, but I want to say a lot of times God isn't in those voices. God is in the silence, and God is in
Mm.
those folk who aren't saying a whole lot, but they get it. They get it.
Yeah.
And they're waiting for courageous leaders to say, hey, I think God is calling us to do this. And I think you'll be shocked at how many folk would be like, yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Yeah, that's my take.
Oh, what joy! What joy that is. Oh, uh, I am so grateful for your time, for your ministry, uh, for teaching me, for being willing to teach others, to talk about the hard stuff. Um, really, uh, and I am truly grateful. Um, so thank you, Reverend
Thank
Doctor
you.
Cliff Matthews. And we thank
Thank you,
everybody for
Megan.
watching. Yes. Yes, we thank everybody for watching and for listening and for being a part of this adventure. Um, and I hope that you all learned something too. Thanks for watching.